A billionaire gave a homeless single mother his unlimited credit card and walked away. Less than 1 hour later, a transaction receipt appeared on his phone. It wasn't food. It wasn't clothes. It wasn't a 5-star hotel booking. It was something he couldn't ignore. Instantly, he knew there would be consequences. Because in that moment, she made a decision that would rewrite her future and expose a truth neither of them was ready to face. 37-year-old Brennan Ashford had stopped believing in human goodness years ago. As CEO of Ashford Global Industries, a pharmaceutical empire worth $11.3 billion, he'd watched people lie, manipulate, and betray for far less than pocket change. His penthouse suite overlooking Boston Harbor had windows that stretched 12 feet high, art worth millions hanging on walls that echoed with expensive emptiness. He owned vacation homes in 3 countries. His watch cost more than most people earned in a year. Yet every morning, he woke up feeling like a man drowning in shallow water. His late father, Montgomery Ashford, had drilled one lesson into him since childhood. Trust is a currency fools spend freely, son. The poor are especially dangerous. Give them an inch, they'll take everything and still demand more. They can't help themselves. Desperation makes thieves of everyone. Brennan had carried that gospel like scripture for 37 years. Every charitable donation filtered through lawyers and accountants. Every act of giving calculated for tax benefits and public image. He'd never once looked poverty in the face and simply helped. Not without conditions. Not without control. Not without protecting himself first. But that January morning, something cracked in the ice around his chest. He was late for an emergency board meeting, rushing through Back Bay Station with his assistant trailing 3 steps behind. His Italian wool coat cost $8,000. His leather briefcase held contracts worth $40 million. His phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from investors, lawyers, executives, all demanding pieces of his attention. Then he saw her. Huddled against the cold tile wall near the Orange Line entrance sat a woman, maybe early 30s, with exhaustion carved into every line of her face. A little girl, no older than 6, slept curled in her lap, wrapped in a donated coat 2 sizes too large. The woman's arms were locked around the child like a fortress made of flesh and bone and desperate love. A piece of cardboard rested beside them. Black marker, shaky letters. Single mother. Lost our home. Anything helps. God bless you. Brennan stopped walking. His assistant nearly crashed into him. Mr. Ashford, the board is waiting. We have exactly 9 minutes to. Wait here, Brennan said, his voice distant, disconnected from the urgency around him. He approached slowly, expensive shoes clicking against subway tile, unsure why his body moved when every logical part of his brain screamed to keep walking. Homeless people were everywhere in Boston. This wasn't special. This wasn't different. This was just another casualty of a system he'd helped build. Except something about her stopped him cold. When the woman looked up, there was no performance in her eyes. No rehearsed desperation or practiced plea. Just bone-deep exhaustion. The kind that settles into marrow after months of carrying weight no single person should bear. Her lips were chapped from winter wind. Her fingernails were clean but ragged. She'd given up on vanity but not on dignity. I'm sorry, she said immediately, voice rough from cold and disuse. We're not bothering anyone. We can move if we need to. Her apology for existing hit Brennan harder than any business loss ever had. What's your name? He asked, kneeling down despite the protests of his expensive pants touching filthy subway floor. She blinked, surprised that kindness wore a suit that expensive. Sutton, she said quietly. Sutton Reeves. And your daughter? The woman's arms instinctively tightened around the sleeping child. Protective. Primal. Her name is Indy. She just turned 6 last week. Brennan studied Sutton's face. Intelligence lived behind that exhaustion. Education in the careful way she spoke. This wasn't someone born into poverty. This was someone who'd fallen from somewhere higher and couldn't find footing on the way down. How long have you been out here? He asked. Shame flickered across Sutton's features like a match struck in darkness. 5 months. We were staying with my sister until November, but she lost her apartment too. We've been rotating between here and the shelter on Mass Avenue when they have space. 5 months. A 6-year-old child sleeping on subway floors for 5 months while thousands of people walked past every single day. His assistant cleared her throat impatiently behind him. Mr. Ashford, we really must. Brennan raised one hand, silencing her without breaking eye contact with Sutton. His father's voice echoed in his skull. The desperate will bleed you dry and smile while doing it. Maybe it was time to test that theory himself. To prove once and for all whether his father had been right or whether Brennan had spent 37 years believing a lie that protected his wallet but poisoned his soul. Brennan reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Sutton's eyes widened slightly, probably expecting a few bills if she was lucky. Maybe $20. Maybe $50 if the universe felt generous. Instead, Brennan pulled out a sleek black credit card. Platinum edges. Raised numbers. No spending limit. No restrictions. Just pure, unrestricted access to wealth most people couldn't comprehend in their wildest dreams. Sutton stared at it like he'd pulled out a weapon. Take it, Brennan said, holding the card between them like a bridge between two different worlds. I don't understand, Sutton stammered, pulling Indy closer as if the card itself might hurt them. It's yours for 24 hours, Brennan explained, his voice steady despite the chaos of doubt screaming inside his head. Buy whatever you want. No limits. No questions. No conditions. Sutton's hands began to tremble. Sir, this has to be some kind of trick. People don't just hand out credit cards to strangers. Especially not to people like me. I want to see something, Brennan said, and for the first time in years he spoke complete truth. I want to see what someone with nothing does when given everything. I want to test something my father taught me. Prove him right or prove him wrong. He pressed the card into her palm. Her fingers were ice cold, rough from exposure, shaking like leaves in a storm. Why me? Sutton whispered, tears pooling in eyes that had cried themselves empty months ago. Brennan looked at Indy, sleeping peacefully despite the cold, despite the noise, despite the absolute instability of her entire world. He thought about his own childhood, nannies and private schools and skiing in Switzerland. Every need met before he could even name it. This child had nothing except a mother who refused to let go. Because I'm tired of assumptions, Brennan said quietly. Because I want to believe there's still something good left in people who've lost everything. Prove my father right or prove him wrong. Either way, I'll finally know the truth. Sutton closed her fingers around the card slowly, like someone touching fire for the first time and expecting to be burned. 24 hours, Brennan repeated, standing up. His knees ached from kneeling on frozen tile. Spend whatever you want. There's no pin. Just sign your name. I'll find you here tomorrow morning. Same time. Same place. His assistant looked physically ill. Mr. Ashford, this is highly irregular. We should at least establish parameters, legal protection. No parameters, Brennan said firmly, his eyes still locked on Sutton. No protection. Just trust. The word felt foreign in his mouth. Trust. He'd spent decades avoiding it like a disease. Sutton opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She just clutched the card like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. Her entire body shaking with emotions Brennan couldn't begin to name. As he walked away, his father's voice whispered warnings in his head. She'll drain your account. She'll disappear into the night. You're a fool, Brennan. A sentimental, naive fool. But another voice, quieter, more fragile, whispered something different. What if she doesn't? Brennan didn't sleep that night. His penthouse felt cavernous and cold despite the heating system that cost more than a car. He stood at the window, staring at Boston's glittering skyline, wondering if somewhere down there, Sutton and Indy were finally warm for the first time in months. He pulled out his phone, opened his banking app. The credit card was linked to his personal account. He could track every transaction in real time, every purchase, every location, every choice she made. For hours, nothing. Midnight came and went. 1 a.m., 2, 3, still nothing. Why wasn't she spending? Was she afraid? Did she think it was a trap? Or worse, was she planning something big, waiting for stores to open, preparing to maximize every possible dollar? At 6:23 a.m., his phone buzzed. Transaction, $37.84. Location, 24-hour CVS, downtown crossing. Brennan's pulse spiked. He clicked for details, but the app only showed the amount. Not what was purchased, just numbers. Then another notification. Transaction, $52.19. Location, Target, South Bay. Then another, $28.63. Dunkin' Donuts. His chest tightened, not with anger, but with something stranger. Anticipation. She was spending, yes, but carefully, modestly. These weren't the transactions of someone drunk on sudden wealth. These were the purchases of someone desperately practical. By 8:47 a.m., Brennan couldn't wait anymore. He called his driver. Cancel everything today, he told his assistant when she called, panicked about the missed board meeting. Mr. Ashford, you have 4 critical meetings and the investors are furious. I don't care, Brennan said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. Cancel it all. Reschedule. Handle it. I don't care how. He dressed quickly, grabbed his coat, and had his driver take him to Back Bay Station. But 3 blocks away, he told the driver to stop. He needed to walk, needed to feel the cold air, needed to remember what the city actually felt like when you weren't insulated by wealth. When he reached the Orange Line entrance, Sutton was exactly where he'd left her. But everything else had changed. Indy was awake now, sitting beside her mother wearing a brand new purple winter coat with a fur-lined hood. Her hair had been brushed, pulled back with a small butterfly clip. She clutched a new stuffed elephant, hugging it like treasure while she colored in a fresh coloring book with crayons still smelling like the package. Sutton saw Brennan approaching and immediately stood up, the credit card already in her trembling hand. I was going to return it, she said quickly, panic edging her voice. I promise I was. I just needed to get a few things first. Basic things. Necessary things. Keep it, Brennan said gently, raising both hands. You still have hours left. Sutton's shoulders sagged with something between relief and confusion. I don't understand you. That makes 2 of us, Brennan admitted. He glanced at Indy, who was watching him with wide, curious brown eyes. You bought her a coat. She was freezing, Sutton said simply, as if that explained everything. And perhaps it did. Perhaps that was the only explanation that mattered. Brennan knelt down to Indy's level, careful not to startle her. That's a nice elephant. What's her name? Indy hugged the toy tighter, shy but smiling. Stella, she whispered. That's a beautiful name, Brennan said softly, his throat tight for reasons he couldn't explain. He looked up at Sutton. What else did you buy? Sutton hesitated, then slowly pulled 2 crumpled receipts from her pocket and handed them over like evidence in a trial she was certain to lose. Brennan scanned the first receipt. Children's winter coat. Size 6. Children's boots. Waterproof. Socks. 3-pack. Children's underwear. Pack of 7. Stuffed elephant toy. Coloring books. Crayons. Children's multivitamins. Band-Aids. Neosporin. Children's cold medicine. His throat tightened. Every single item was for Indy, not one thing for herself. The second receipt was from a grocery store. Bread, peanut butter, granola bars, apples, juice boxes, crackers, string cheese, a gallon of milk. And at the bottom, something that made Brennan's breath catch. Women's Shelter Donation Fund, $100. If this moment is hitting you, subscribe for more stories like this. Now let's continue. He looked up sharply. You donated money? Sutton's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The shelter on Mass Avenue. They've helped us when they could. They're always full, always running out of supplies. I thought, if I had extra, even just for one day, maybe I could help them help someone else. Someone else? Brennan repeated, his voice barely functional. You're homeless. You've been sleeping on subway floors for 5 months. And you gave money to help other people. There are women there with babies, Sutton said quietly. With teenagers. With disabilities. Some of them have it so much worse than we do. I know what it's like to need help and have nowhere to turn. If I could give back even a little, even for one day, I had to. Brennan stared at the receipts. His father's voice was completely silent now, obliterated by the truth printed on thermal paper. This woman, who had every reason to be selfish, who had every justification to think only of herself and her daughter, had spent a billionaire's money on necessities, medicine, and charity. Not liquor, not designer clothes, not jewelry or electronics or anything remotely self-indulgent. Just survival, just kindness, just love. You didn't buy anything for yourself, Brennan said, his voice strained. Not a single thing. Sutton shook her head. Indy comes first. She always comes first. I can manage. I've managed this long. But she deserves better. She deserves to be warm, to be safe, to be a child. Brennan looked at Indy, coloring a picture of a butterfly with fierce concentration. Stella the elephant tucked under her arm. A child who'd spent 6 years learning that the world was cold and unstable, but who still smiled, still colored, still hoped. For the first time in his life, Brennan Ashford felt genuinely small. Not in wealth, not in power, but in character, in humanity, in basic human decency. This homeless single mother had more grace in her roughened fingertips than he'd cultivated in 37 years of privilege. Come with me, he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before his brain could catch up. Sutton blinked. What? Both of you, come with me, please. Fear flickered in her eyes. Where? Somewhere warm, Brennan said, his voice breaking slightly. Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can finally stop running. Tears spilled down Sutton's cheeks. She looked at her daughter, then at the man kneeling before them, and for the first time in 5 months, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, not everyone in the world was cruel. Brennan took them to the Four Seasons first. Not his penthouse that felt too invasive, too overwhelming. Instead, he booked a corner suite overlooking the public garden, with 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and windows that let in actual sunlight instead of fluorescent subway glare. Sutton stood in the doorway, frozen, unable to cross the threshold. It's okay, Brennan said gently. This is yours, for as long as you need it. No conditions, no expectations, just safety. Indy, unburdened by adult disbelief, ran inside immediately, her new boots squeaking on polished hardwood. She touched everything with wonder. The velvet couch, the heavy curtains, the bowl of fresh fruit on the marble counter. Mama, look, Indy called, pointing at the bathroom. There's a bathtub, a really big one, like in the movies. Sutton finally stepped inside, moving like someone walking through a dream that might shatter at any moment. She set down the plastic bag that held everything she owned, literally everything that remained of her previous life, and turned to Brennan with tears streaming freely. I don't understand, she whispered, voice fracturing. Why are you doing this? What do you want from us? Brennan had been asked that question 1,000 times in business. People always wanted to know his angle, his strategy, his hidden agenda. But standing there, watching a mother see safety for the first time in months, he realized he didn't have an agenda. He just had a choice. You reminded me what money is actually for, he said quietly. I'd forgotten. Or maybe I never knew. Sutton walked over to where Indy was pressing buttons on the TV remote, delighted by every channel that appeared. She knelt down and wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her like she'd been afraid to hold her too tightly before, as if hope itself might break. You need to rest, Brennan said, his voice thick. Order room service. Take a real bath. Sleep in an actual bed. I'll come back tomorrow morning. We'll figure out the next steps then. Next steps? Sutton asked, confusion and fear mixing in her expression. Housing, employment, school for Indy, healthcare, childcare, stability. Brennan listed them like a business plan because that's what his brain did. It solved problems systematically. None of this has to be temporary, unless you want it to be. Sutton stared at him like he'd just spoken a language she'd forgotten existed. You're serious. Completely. You're a stranger. We're nobody. We're just two people who got unlucky and couldn't climb back out. You were nobody, Brennan corrected gently. Now you're someone I care about. Now you matter. Now you have someone who won't let you fall again. Sutton opened her mouth to argue, to protest, to explain all the reasons this couldn't be real. But exhaustion won. 5 months of hypervigilance and fear and sleeping with one eye open came crashing down. She sank onto the couch, her body folding like someone who'd been holding up the sky and could finally let it rest on something stronger. Thank you, she whispered, and the words carried the weight of 5 months of suffering compressed into 2 syllables. Brennan nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Get some rest, Sutton. You're safe now. Both of you. As he left the suite, he heard Indy's delighted laughter echoing behind him, and Brennan Ashford realized he was smiling. Not the calculated, camera-ready smile he used in boardrooms, but something genuine, something human, something his face had almost forgotten how to do. That night, Brennan made phone calls, not to lawyers or PR teams or financial advisors, but to people who actually helped: social workers, housing advocates, job placement specialists, education coordinators. He used his name not as a weapon, but as a key to open doors that had been slammed in Sutton's face for months. By morning, he had options. Real, tangible, sustainable options. He returned to the Four Seasons at 9 a.m., carrying coffee and a bag of fresh pastries from a bakery Indy would love. When Sutton opened the door, she looked transformed. Not in appearance, she still wore the same worn clothes, but in posture. In the way she stood straighter. In the way her eyes held something other than perpetual fear. Indy was drawing at the table, humming a song about butterflies. Stella sat proudly beside her, overseeing the artwork. Morning, Brennan said, handing Sutton the coffee. She took it with both hands, inhaling the steam like a memory she'd thought was lost forever. Real coffee. From an actual coffee shop. I forgot what that was like. They sat together while Indy colored, and Brennan laid out the plan. A 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood near good schools. Subsidized initially, but with a pathway to full independence. Job training programs matched to her skills. Healthcare coverage. Indy enrolled in 1st grade at a public school with excellent ratings and a before and after care program. Sutton listened in stunned silence, tears running down her face, dripping into coffee that had grown cold while Brennan talked. This isn't charity? Brennan clarified, echoing what he'd been telling himself all night. It's an investment. You're intelligent, capable, and resilient. You just need a foundation to rebuild from. A place to stand so you can start climbing again. I don't know how to repay you, Sutton said, her voice barely above a whisper. You already did, Brennan replied. You showed me that goodness still exists in people. That desperation doesn't automatically create monsters. That my father was wrong about everything that actually matters. Sutton shook her head, more tears falling. I just bought what Indy needed. Exactly, Brennan said. You had unlimited wealth for 24 hours, and you chose love over greed. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How many people would have drained that card buying things for themselves and walked away without looking back? Sutton looked at her daughter, carefully coloring inside the lines of a flower, her small tongue poking out in concentration. She's all I have. She's all that matters. Everything I do, every choice I make, it's all for her. I know, Brennan said softly. I saw it in those receipts. I saw it in that donation to the shelter. You could have taken everything, but you gave anyway. That's not just good. That's extraordinary. 3 weeks later, Sutton and Indy moved into their new apartment. 2 bedrooms on the 3rd floor of a clean, quiet building with a small playground out back. It wasn't luxury, laminate counters, builder-grade carpet, fixtures from a catalog, but it was theirs. Walls that didn't move. A door that locked from the inside. Heat that worked. Windows that let in light without letting in wind. Brennan helped them move in, carrying boxes, assembling furniture from IKEA, laughing when Indy insisted on supervising, by placing Stella on every flat surface and declaring it decorated. She's very particular about interior design, Sutton joked, watching her daughter arrange stuffed animals with the seriousness of an architect. Brennan didn't mind. For the first time in years, he felt useful. Not powerful. Not influential. Not wealthy. Just useful. Just present. Just human. That evening, after Indy fell asleep in her new bed, her very first bed that wasn't a couch or a floor or someone else's charity, Sutton and Brennan stood in the small living room, exhaustion and gratitude hanging thick between them. "I start the workforce development program next Monday," Sutton said. "Medical coding and billing. The stable work. Good benefits. A real career path." "You're going to be incredible at it," Brennan said, and he meant it. Sutton looked around the apartment, her eyes glistening in the lamplight. "I keep waiting to wake up back at the subway station, to realize this was all some elaborate dream I had while freezing on concrete." "It's real," Brennan assured her. "It's yours. No one can take it away." She turned to face him, her voice breaking around the edges. "Why did you choose us? Out of all the people you could have helped, out of everyone in this city who's struggling, why me and Indy?" Brennan had thought about that question every day since that morning at the subway station. He'd analyzed it like a business decision, broken it down into logical components. But the truth was simpler and more complicated than logic. "Because you looked at your daughter the way my mother used to look at me," he said quietly. "Before she died. Before my father turned cold and bitter and taught me that trust was weakness. You looked at Indy like nothing else in the world existed. Like you'd burn down the universe to keep her safe. And I realized I'd spent 37 years believing people like you didn't exist anymore." Sutton wiped her eyes. "You gave us a future." "No," Brennan said. "You already had a future. I just helped you reach it. You did the hard part. You survived. You kept Indy safe. You stayed good when the world gave you every reason to be bitter. That's all you. I just removed some obstacles." Sutton smiled through tears. "You're different than I expected. When I first saw you at the station, in your expensive coat with your expensive briefcase, I thought you'd be cold. Cruel, maybe. Indifferent at best." "I was all of those things," Brennan admitted. "You changed that. You and Indy. You reminded me that wealth is worthless if it doesn't multiply meaning." They stood in comfortable silence, the apartment settling around them with creaks and hums that sounded like peace. Indy's soft breathing drifted from the bedroom. Traffic hummed distantly outside. The radiator clicked on, flooding the space with warmth. For the first time in 5 months, Sutton looked relaxed. And for the first time in 37 years, Brennan felt like his life had actual purpose. Months passed. Sutton completed her training program with honors, landed a position at Boston Medical Center with full benefits and regular hours. Indy thrived in first grade, making friends, bringing home artwork, no longer carrying the weight of homelessness in her small shoulders. Brennan visited often, not as a benefactor checking on an investment, but as a friend. Someone who attended Indy's school talent show where she sang, "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," off-key, but with complete confidence. Someone who helped Sutton navigate apartment maintenance when the sink started leaking. Someone who showed up on difficult days and didn't need to be asked. He learned things about himself he'd never known. That he liked cooking simple meals more than expensive restaurants. That children's laughter was better than board meeting applause. That watching someone rebuild their life was more satisfying than watching his stock portfolio grow. One evening, sitting on Sutton's modest couch while Indy showed him her science project about butterflies, Sutton handed him something. His credit card. "I kept it," she admitted, blushing. "I know I should have given it back weeks ago, but I was scared. Scared that if I returned it, all of this would disappear. That it was only real as long as I held onto that piece of plastic." Brennan smiled, closing her fingers back around the card. "Keep it." "Brennan, I can't." "Emergency fund," he said simply. "For Indy. For unexpected expenses. For peace of mind. You've proven exactly what you do with it. You've proven I can trust you more than I trust most people I've known for decades." Sutton stared at the card, then at him. "You really mean that?" "Completely." She wiped her eyes, laughing through tears. You're the strangest billionaire I've ever met. How many billionaires have you met? Brennan teased. Just you, Sutton admitted. But I'm pretty sure you're the strange one. Good, Brennan said. I'd hate to be predictable. 2 years later, Brennan stood at a podium in front of hundreds of people. Investors, journalists, philanthropists, politicians. He was announcing something new. Something that would have made his father turn in his grave. The Ashford Foundation for Family Stability. Comprehensive support for single parents facing homelessness. Emergency housing. Job training. Childcare. Healthcare. Education support. No applications. No bureaucracy. No degrading processes. Just help, extended with dignity, to people who'd been failed by every other system. And sitting in the front row, wearing a simple blue dress she'd bought with her own paycheck, holding Indy's hand, was Sutton Reeves. No longer homeless. No longer desperate. No longer invisible. Just a mother who'd survived hell and found her footing on the other side. Brennan caught her eye during the speech and she smiled. The kind of smile that said everything words couldn't. Gratitude, pride, friendship, hope. He thought about that January morning at Back Bay Station. About a credit card extended like a test. About his father's warnings that the desperate would destroy him. But his father had been wrong about everything. The desperate weren't dangerous. They were human, capable of extraordinary love, remarkable resilience, and stunning generosity when given the smallest opportunity. Sutton Reeves had taught him that, had shattered his assumptions with receipts for children's coats and shelter donations, had broken his heart open in the best possible way. After the press conference, reporters swarmed with questions. But Brennan only cared about 2 people. He found Sutton and Indy outside, near the fountain in front of the building. You did it, Sutton said, tears streaming down her face. You're really doing this. You're going to help so many families. We're doing this, Brennan corrected. I want you on the foundation board. I want your voice, your perspective, your experience. I need someone who's been there, someone who understands what it's really like. Sutton looked shocked. Me? On a board? Brennan, I don't have any experience with. You have the only experience that matters, Brennan interrupted. You survived. You stayed good. You know exactly what families need because you needed it. You're perfect for this. Indy tugged on Brennan's sleeve. Mr. Brennan, does this mean more people will get homes like we did? Brennan knelt down to her level, now 8 years old, thriving, no longer the frightened child sleeping on subway floors. Yes, sweetheart. Lots of families. Because your mom reminded me what helping actually means. Indy smiled, then wrapped her arms around his neck in a fierce hug. You're like family now. Right, Mama? Sutton wiped her eyes, nodding. Right, baby. He's family. Brennan felt something crack open in his chest. Something that had been frozen solid for 3 decades. His father had taught him that trust was weakness, that kindness was naive, that the poor would destroy him. But Sutton had taught him something different, something true. That wealth without compassion is just numbers. That power without purpose is just noise. That the richest thing a person can own isn't money. It's the ability to look someone in the eyes and say, I see you. You matter. I'll help you stand. As they walked through Boston together, a billionaire, a single mother, and a little girl clutching a worn stuffed elephant, Brennan realized he'd finally found what he'd been searching for his entire life. Not more money, not more power, not more control, just meaning, just purpose, just the knowledge that his existence made someone else's life better. Sutton had given him that, had broken his heart wide open with kindness and survival and love. And he would spend the rest of his life grateful that one freezing January morning, he'd stopped walking and looked poverty in the face and found humanity staring back. The test he'd designed for Sutton had actually been a test for himself. And he'd finally, miraculously, passed. Thank you for watching. Take a few seconds to subscribe, like and share this story to people you love. See you on the next one. Love you.